Have you ever paused, to consider the hidden elements powering basically everything, from the smartphone right here in your hand to a cutting-edge F-35 fighter jet, or even what makes those giant wind turbines spin so efficiently? Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into this obscure yet absolutely essential world of rare earth elements and critical minerals. Our mission really is to unpack why these seemingly unglamorous materials have become such an urgent flashpoint. Think global geopolitics, economic strategy.
Yeah, especially with the surging demand for green energy technologies and, of course, advanced defense systems. They all rely heavily on these materials.
Exactly.
It's a fascinating paradox, actually. Despite the name, rare earth elements aren't truly rare geologically. They're more abundant in the Earth's crust than, say, gold.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but here's the kicker. They are incredibly difficult, costly, and frankly environmentally damaging to extract and then process into a usable form. And that inherent challenge that's central to their strategic importance.
Right. And our journey today takes us to a place that perfectly encapsulates this global scramble, Greenland. We're going to explore its immense mineral potential, the intense international interests swirling around it, and the profound local dilemmas its people face. It's really a story of resources, power, and maybe the future of our planet. So, okay, we hear rare earths thrown around a lot, but for someone trying to grasp their true significance, what are we actually talking about? What makes them so uniquely crucial?
Well, fundamentally, rare earths are a specific group of 17 metallic elements on the periodic table. You've got scandium, yttrium, and the lanthanides. Their importance comes down to their unique properties, magnetic, luminescent, electrochemical properties.
You don't find elsewhere.
Pretty much. They enable technologies that wouldn't be possible otherwise. They make them indispensable across just a vast array of technologies.
Okay.
Think about it. They're in your everyday devices, your smartphone, those bright LED lights, flat-screen TVs. But their applications go way beyond consumer gadgets. They are absolutely critical components for electric vehicle batteries.
Right, the EV revolution.
Exactly. And the powerful magnets inside wind turbines, even advanced medical equipment like MRI scanners, and believe it or not, certain cancer treatments, they are quite literally woven into the fabric of our technological lives.
And it gets really interesting, maybe a bit sobering, when you look at the national security angle. Our sources hammer this point home. Their essential role in military applications.
Yeah.
We're talking F-35 fighter jets, submarines.
Lasers, satellites, Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah, the list goes on. It's not just about faster phones. It's fundamentally about defense capabilities. Without these elements, many of our most advanced defense systems simply wouldn't work.
Which brings us squarely to China. Their overwhelming historical and frankly current control of the rare earth supply chain is, well, it's striking.
How dominant are we talking?
Think about this. Back in 2010, China accounted for over 90% of global rare earth production. Now, that figure's dropped. It's about 60% of mine production as of 2023. But, and this is key, they still control a staggering 92% of the global processing capacity.
92%, wow.
Yeah. And to put that into perspective for the U.S., between 2020 and 2023, China supplied roughly 70% of America's rare earth imports.
And China has definitely shown it's willing to use that leverage. I mean, think back to 2010, China first cut its export quotas. Then after that maritime incident with Japan, they just stopped sales to Japan completely.
Right, I remember that.
Yep.
Huge shockwaves.
And what happened? Japan, totally reliant on these metals for its tech and auto industries, basically backed down within 4 days. China kept the embargo going for another 5 weeks, and prices just shot through the roof.
Yeah.
And it's not just ancient history. Fast forward to 2025, in response to new U.S. tariffs, China announced new license requirements for exporting 7 specific rare earths and the magnets made from them.
And the impact was immediate, wasn't it?
Absolutely. U.S. imports slumped, and you had major companies like Ford actually halting production lines because they couldn't get the magnets they needed. It's a very clear demonstration of their strategic leverage. They can turn the tap off, or at least slow it down pretty quickly.
Indeed. And it's not just about the overall supply. Take samarium, for instance, this specific element. It's exclusively produced and processed in China.
Exclusively?
Exclusively, and it's essential for military applications, including, as you mentioned, those F-35 fighter jets. That single point highlights a critical vulnerability for any nation without diverse supply chains. Now, here's where it gets particularly fascinating, a kind of ironic twist. Despite this global dominance, China itself has become a net importer of rare earths.
Wait, they control the processing, but they're importing the raw materials.
Exactly. This shift is largely driven by their own massive industrial strategy, Made in China 2025. They aim to become a high-tech manufacturing superpower across 10 key sectors, and guess what? All of them heavily rely on rare earths or rare earth magnets.
So their own demand is skyrocketing.
Precisely. They're now relying on countries like Myanmar, especially for heavy rare earths, and even their own supply chain isn't immune to political instability in those regions. So it raises a huge question: if even China needs more, where does the rest of the world look?
That is a crucial question. And it leads us directly to the global hunt for alternatives. Which brings us, as we mentioned, squarely to Greenland. It's become a major focus. You might remember President Donald Trump's very public, persistent interest in, well, acquiring the Danish territory?
He wasn't subtle about it.
No.
Yeah.
And he explicitly cited economic security and its vast, mostly untapped mineral resources as the reason.
And he wasn't wrong about the potential. Greenland's potential is genuinely immense. Geologically, it holds the 8th largest reserves of rare earth elements in the world.
8th largest, wow.
And beyond rare earths, it also has significant amounts of other critical stuff. Lithium, cobalt, both absolutely crucial for the green energy transition. The sheer mineral wealth thought to be hidden under that ice sheet is staggering.
And that potential is definitely drawing serious international attention, right? Look at the Tanbreez rare earth project in southern Greenland. Critical Metals Corp, the company involved, has recently been tapped by the U.S. Export-Import Bank, that's EXIM, for a loan potentially worth up to $120 million to get this project going.
That's significant funding.
It is. And this isn't some small pilot project. It's situated on a colossal 4.7 billion ton mineralized unit that makes it one of the world's largest known rare earth deposits. Their production targets are ambitious too, aiming for 85,000 tons annually by 2026 and then scaling up to an incredible 425,000 tons.
And the geopolitics behind that EXIM loan are pretty clear. The bank itself stated that Critical Metals Corp qualifies for the funding precisely because its business competes directly with China.
So it's explicitly about challenging China's dominance.
Explicitly. In fact, there are reports that U.S. officials actively lobbied the previous owner of Tanbreez not to sell to a Chinese developer, but to push the deal towards critical metals instead. If this loan gets final approval, this project would actually be the first overseas mining initiative to get U.S. government funding under the Trump administration's push, signifying a clear strategic move to diversify supply.
So you have this huge, potential, massive international interest, U.S. government backing. But it's not that simple on the ground, is it?
Not at all. What's really fascinating here is the complex reality in Greenland itself. Despite this immense mineral wealth and all the talk, its mining sector has actually seen surprisingly little progress. It's a mix of factors. Sometimes significant investor disinterest, bureaucratic hurdles, and perhaps most importantly, widespread environmental concerns among the population.
Right.
Greenland really embodies that rare earth paradox. Resources are abundant, but they're incredibly difficult to access for various reasons, leading to these intense pressures, both globally and locally.
And those environmental concerns, they seem to be right at the heart of local resistance. Take the Kavana field site near Narsak in the south. It's another major deposit, rare earths, but also uranium.
Yes, the uranium is a key point there.
Absolutely. And local communities have very real fears about toxic waste, specifically tailings, that's leftover slurry, often radioactive, from mining contaminating their drinking water, their sheep farms.
Things essential to their way of life.
Exactly. And it's not just a hypothetical fear. Greenland has a troubled history with mining pollution. There are lead and zinc mine sites from the 1970s that are still showing contamination in fish, mussels, seaweed 50 years later.
50 years.
50 years. This directly impacts the Inuit hunter-gatherer livelihoods, which are so intimately tied to the health of their local ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the idea of introducing potentially more pollution, especially radioactive waste, it's a very, very serious concern for them.
And this widespread concern translated directly into politics. The 2021 Greenlandic election was even dubbed the mining election by international media because uranium was such a central, polarizing issue.
Right, it became the defining issue.
It really did. A green left-wing government led by the Inuit Adequajichit Party was elected on an explicit anti-uranium mining platform. And once in power, they delivered on that promise. They passed legislation that effectively banned uranium mining.
Which essentially put the brakes on certain projects.
It effectively froze projects like Kvanefjeld, because while Kvanefjeld is primarily a rare earth deposit, getting to those rare earths would mean unearthing significant amounts of uranium, which was now banned.
Okay, so Greenland makes this sovereign, democratic decision based on environmental and local concerns. But this brings up a really fascinating and, frankly, contentious area of international law. What happens when that decision clashes with massive foreign investment? I'm thinking about these investor-state dispute settlement lawsuits, ISDS.
You're absolutely right to bring that up. Energy Transition Minerals, or ETM, that's the company that operated the Kvanefjeld site, and it's partly owned by a Chinese government-backed company, interestingly enough, is now suing the government of Greenland.
Suing them? For how much?
They're suing for up to $11.5 billion.
Billion, with a B.
Billion. To give you some context, that's nearly 10 times Greenland's entire annual budget.
That's astonishing. So the lawsuit basically claims Greenland's decision to ban uranium mining, which stopped their project, amounts to expropriation, taking their investment without fair compensation.
Exactly.
And this highlights a really controversial aspect of these ISDS mechanisms, doesn't it? They were initially designed, maybe, to protect foreign businesses from outright corruption or unfair seizure by states, but critics argue they're increasingly used to challenge legitimate environmental laws or public health regulations. It raises huge questions about democratic sovereignty.
Greenland's mining minister, Naija Nathanielsen, has been very vocal about this. She views the lawsuit as a direct attack on their democratic institutions. She's called it a form of bullying.
Strong words.
Very strong. She publicly stated, "We are going to fight until the end," emphasizing that the government was democratically elected and followed a proper public process for the law. ETM, naturally, sees it distantly. They frame it as a clear case of expropriation, arguing they're entitled to compensation because a democratically elected government changed the rules after they had invested.
It's a real clash of perspectives.
It is. And it's also worth noting that these massive legal battles are often funded by specialized litigation finance firms, like Burford Capital. They cover the hefty legal costs for the company suing in exchange for a significant share of any potential payout. It adds another layer to the dynamic.
So beyond the huge legal battles and the political shifts, what about just the practical hurdles? You mentioned Greenland being difficult to access. What does that mean in reality for mining?
It means huge challenges. First off, 80% of the island is covered by a massive ice sheet. The remaining ice-free areas are mostly rugged mountains. Critically, there are basically no roads connecting the different settlements.
No roads.
None. Transport is entirely reliant on boats when the sea isn't frozen, or air travel. So just imagine the astronomical costs associated with building the necessary infrastructure from scratch, deepwater harbors, power supplies, accommodation, transport links, just to support a large-scale mining operation in that environment.
Okay, that's a major obstacle.
And then there's the processing challenge we touched on earlier. Rare earth elements aren't like gold, where you might find a nugget. They're typically locked chemically within other, more complex minerals.
Right. Not easy to separate.
Not at all. And often these mineral structures are intimately mixed with radioactive substances like uranium or thorium. This makes the extraction and processing extremely difficult, technically complex, and expensive. It also adds significant layers of complexity and cost just to meet environmental regulations and safely manage the waste.
So given all these challenges, China's dominance, the difficulties in places like Greenland, the sheer complexity of it all, how is the U.S. actually planning to secure its rare earth supply and lessen that dependence on China? Let's unpack the broader strategy.
Well, first you have to remember the history. For years, the U.S. largely outsourced its rare earth production and processing. You had companies like Molycorp operating the Mountain Pass mine in California, which once supplied most of the world's rare earths.
Right, they were dominant ones.
They were. And Magnequench, a key U.S. magnet producer. But Molycorp went through bankruptcies and restructuring, and Magnequench was acquired by Chinese entities, with production moving overseas. So there was a deliberate, or maybe just market-driven, offshoring.
So what's happening now to reverse that?
Current efforts are squarely focused on reshoring and diversifying. The Pentagon, for example, recognizing the defense implications, has invested directly in companies like MP Materials, the current owner of the Mountain Pass mine in Lynas, which is a major Australian mining company.
Investing to do what?
To build rare earth processing plants right here in the U.S., specifically in Texas. The goal is clear. Bring more of that crucial midstream processing part of the supply chain back onto American soil, or at least into the hands of close allies like Australia.
Okay, so domestic processing is a focus. But then you hear about things like the proposed U.S.-Ukraine critical minerals deal. What's the thinking there? Because some experts seem skeptical.
Skeptical is putting it mildly. What's particularly striking, maybe even a bit perplexing to some observers, is this proposed deal. You have experts like Jack Lifton from the Critical Minerals Institute who are quite dismissive. He's described Ukraine's rare earth deposits as non-existent or, at best, economically unviable.
Non-existent, that's blunt.
Very blunt. He flat out called the entire proposal a fantasy. And the argument is that even if there weren't a war, developing any significant mining operation there would take at least 15 years and require billions in private investment, which just isn't on the horizon. It does make you wonder about the quality of intelligence or strategic thinking behind some of these proposals.
Yeah, it seems disconnected from reality.
Well, this alleged fantasy in Ukraine, as Lifton calls it, connects to a broader criticism some experts level at U.S. government strategy in this whole area. They talk about a lack of perspective on critical mineral sourcing.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, critics argue, that the U.S. sometimes seems to ignore the established, complex international mining structure, how things actually get found, funded, mined, and processed globally. And ironically, they might even be discounting potentially substantial rare earth deposits within America's own borders. Think places like California, Alaska, Texas, Wyoming.
So, potentially ignoring domestic options while chasing questionable ones abroad.
That's the criticism, yes. It raises this fundamental question. How does a policy like America First actually function in a world that's completely interconnected and dependent on resources that are geographically dispersed and often located in geopolitically complicated places?
It's a tricky balance. So pulling this all together, what does it mean for us, for you listening? This whole race for rare earths, it really feels like a microcosm of a much larger geopolitical struggle, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's this constant tension between urgent global strategic needs, we need these things for green energy, for advanced defense, and then these incredibly complex local realities, environmental concerns, questions of sovereignty, basic economic viability. And what we've seen, really, is how China's long-term strategic approach, planned and executed over decades, has given it what some analysts call an overwhelming structural advantage in this new era of resource competition.
While the West plays catch-up.
Essentially, yes. Western nations are now grappling with both the immediate challenges like potential supply disruptions and the much longer-term, harder challenge of trying to diversify their critical mineral supply chains, basically from scratch in some areas, in a relatively short time frame.
So ultimately, the path forward for critical minerals, particularly in these frontier regions like Greenland, it demands just an incredibly delicate balance. It's not just about the geology, what's hiding under the ice.
No, not at all.
It's about this intricate web of technological capability, volatile global and local politics, and critically, the rights, the environment, and the well-being of the local communities whose lands hold these resources.
Which really leaves us with a crucial question for you, the listener, to consider. As the world races towards this green energy future, a future that, ironically, relies so heavily on extracting more critical minerals from the earth, how do we possibly reconcile that urgent need for resources with our responsibility to the environment, with the sovereignty of local populations, and ultimately with the long-term health of our planet?
A challenging question with no easy answers. Something to definitely think about.